If you're anything like me, you probably don't like it when things happen behind the scenes of business and you're not quite sure on what's going on and how things work. In the case of this video, a watch business appraising a watch before potentially buying it. I want to see if I can shine a little light by explaining my personal process in a bit more depth. In an ideal world, any watch that I buy will sell quickly for a good price and I'll make a fair and reasonable profit margin. Now, in order to be able to sell great watches, I first have to buy great watches. But how do I make that happen? What factors and necessities come into play when I appraise a watch to see if it makes good financial sense for me to purchase it with resale and profit making in mind? How do I avoid buying a watch that will take a long time to sell and when it does eventually sell gets haggled down to the bone like the buying of a cheap rug in a desert market stall? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about it. I'm Marcelo from Prestige Watches. My passion is helping other watch enthusiasts with their watch buying and selling goals. I like to save people hassles and headaches and their valuable time when it comes to buying and selling their watches. My aim is to guide through the different processes and avoid the pitfalls and perils that can come with buying and selling watches, which can be fun and enjoyable, but there are also some risks. Now, I love buying watches as much as I love selling them. And I do have lots of people contacting me pretty much every day asking me if I'd like to buy their watch. And people might sell their watch if they need to cash in. Perhaps they realise another watch enthusiast might enjoy it more and some are gathering dust or have lost their place in the rotation. Or the selling of one or more watches will help contribute towards the next watch purchase. And I always say out with the old, in with the new. If it's not being worn and enjoyed, make way for a new watch. Now, because I have such a passion for watches on a personal level, when I do go into watch buying mode, and that is buying watches for the business to then sell on, it can sometimes be hard to think with my business head and not with my watch enthusiast heart. And it can be a problem for me because I go down a path of buying watches I like personally, but may not make good commercial sense for the business to then resell on. And as a watch enthusiast and also a professional in the industry, I need to buy watches that I'll be able to sell on and hopefully make a few pennies for my kids' piggy banks, and not just the ones that I like the look of or am interested in. Some businesses call these purchased watches stock and some call it inventory. I'd like to explain my buying process and highlight the important things I take into consideration when deciding whether or not to buy a watch from a seller or not. What drives that decision? What must I review to arrive at a yes or no answer? This may not be exactly the same for every watch business, but I'm sure they'll follow a similar process. If I buy the watch well, then I go on to resell that watch relatively quickly and make a profit. If I buy unwisely, either the watch will take ages to sell or I'll make a very low profit, which as a business owner is a bit unexciting. Or worse, I might make a loss, and that is selling the watch at a price that is lower than I actually paid for it, and no business wants that. So as a watch pro, if I do a good job with my buying, I get to make a few pennies, and that's just the reality of watch businesses, to make a profit on the watches that they sell. And ultimately, the three main factors that I need to consider when looking to buy a watch are the watch itself, the current market environment, and the expected buy price of the watch from the seller. The first thing I need is to get to know as much about the watch as possible that's being sold. And in order to appraise the watch, I'll need basic watch details, the brand, the model, the reference number, ideally some pictures of the watch and any accessories that come with it. The more pictures and the more detailed, the better for me. I like to know the year of the watch, the condition of the watch and the strap and the bracelet. Does the watch come with its original box and its original papers? If it's an older watch, I like to know when it was last serviced and if there's any service paperwork. Does the watch function as it should? Does it keep good time? Does it work properly? Does the date, the chronograph, the GMT function or any other complications all work? And finally, what is the price that the seller is hoping to achieve? And once I've received all of this kick-off information, I need to start going a bit deeper with my due diligence and research. I'll start looking at the watch's place in the current market. Here, I'll look at if the watch that is being sold is in demand. Is it a watch that people are interested in? Do people care about it? Is there a demand for it? A watch that is interesting and in demand is better for me, as it will most likely sell faster. If you're a watch enthusiast watching this, then you'll probably know what the more in demand, more sought after watches are. Is it an iconic watch? Is it a classic? Is it a rare watch that people actively hunt down and seek to buy? Or is it something that's a bit more run of the mill? Maybe it's a watch of an acquired taste, or maybe a little left field. All this needs to be taken into consideration. Next, I'll check out the availability of other competing watches in the market. Are there many around, or in my country, or just a few? What about in Europe or around the rest of the world? Since Brexit, importing watches to the UK from around the world has become more expensive with the addition of VAT and import taxes. So there's been a lot more UK to UK trading, with less imports coming into the UK. If there are lots of the same watch that I'm looking to buy available in the UK, that's not so good for me. If there are loads available around the world, also not so good. But mainly UK buyers will be put off by the importing and exporting process and procedures from international sellers. So they only look at domestic availability for faster, less hassle purchases. If there are some of the same watch around in the UK, are they nearby to me? Are they close to where I am or far away? Many people prefer to buy locally and like to be able to pre-inspect the watch, or perhaps pick it up or have the watch hand delivered, especially if it has a higher price tag. So taking into consideration import duties and sales taxes and delivery risk, the fewer watches available in the market, the better for me. And even better if the ones that are up there for grabs are located far away. Next, I'll look at the strength of the competition. If the other dealers have the same watch available, I'll look at the reputation of the sellers with the same watch. I'll look at the proximity or the location of these sellers compared to where I am. I'll look at the quality of their competing watch in comparison to the one I'm looking to buy. If other sellers have the same watch but in bad condition, or there's no box or papers, or they've got weaker reputations, maybe bad reviews, of course that's good for me. If their watch is a strong like for like in comparison to the one that the seller's offering me, that's of course not so good. Next, I'll look at the pricing spread of competing watches in the market. Is there a wide spread or a narrow one? The spread is the price difference from low to high. Is it a narrow or wide range? For example, a narrow spread might be where £5,000 is the cheapest on the market and £5,800 is the highest price. A wider spread example might be that £4,000 is the lowest competing price on the market and £7,500 is the highest price. A wide spread is not so good because it means it's more important to be at the lower end of the pricing scale to make your watch more competitive, desirable and help it sell faster. After all, why would somebody buy a watch for £6,000 when they can get the same watch or thereabouts for £5,000 from multiple other sellers that are nearby? Watches with a wide competing price spread is much more competitive a zone to be in. And as I mentioned earlier, ideally I don't want a watch that will take me a long time to sell. Next up, I'll look at the watch itself and the 4 important physical factors to consider to gauge how quickly a watch will sell, how much profit I can make and what price I need to sell it for are the condition of the watch itself, aesthetically and functionally. Does the watch have its original box and papers? Has it been serviced recently? Are there any service papers? And I'd like to know who serviced it. Was it the brand manufacturer or some third party? And of course, very importantly, your wish price, how much you're hoping to get for the watch. Once I know this, I enter the data into my little risk point scoring tally, where I mark each contributing factor with a score of 1 to 5, with 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. And this is done using my industry knowledge and sometimes doing a bit of watch research or homework if the watch that I'm looking to buy isn't that well known to me. Then I'll tally up the score and see where we are. And my risk assessment might look something like this. Top marks, 20 points, but this is seldom achieved. Great, a great score would be something between 16 and 19 points. A fair risk watch purchase would be 12 to 15 points. Risky would be 8 to 11 points, and very risky would be below 7 points. And ideally for me, a watch I'm looking to buy will be 12 or higher. When researching the market, I'll always try to compare against other like-for-like watches, that is similar year, similar condition, box and papers and location, and evaluate the pricing spread of the competition so I can then arrive at a concluding decision-making stage of how hard will your watch be to sell? Will it be easy or difficult? How long will it take to sell? Will it sell quickly or might it take ages? How much profit can I make from the watch? The opportunity cost. And that is, if I'm buying your watch, what other purchases am I possibly missing out on? And as a smaller watch business, cash flow is a very real situation that I need to factor in. Bigger watch businesses don't need to worry too much about this because they'll more likely have more working capital and be able to purchase new stock without worrying about cash flow. A watch professional should also conduct proper background checks and due diligence on the provenance and the integrity of the watch that they're looking to buy to make sure everything's above board. Has the watch come to sale from ethical means? Does the seller have the rights to sell the watch? Are they the legal and rightful owners of the watch? Has the watch been checked with the watch register to check that it's been reported lost or stolen ever? And all of these things affect my purchase decision making. It can sometimes be a little uncomfortable when making offers on watches, especially when taking the seller's wish price into consideration, because many sellers, and rightly so, will be doing their own market investigations and seeing the overinflated pricing on some of the big marketplace platforms out there, and they think that this is the going rate for their watch, when the reality is quite different, because the advertised or listed price is not always the same as the sold for amounts. Now, I often find, especially with Rolex and Patek and even AP buyers, every seller is very business minded and has an entrepreneurial spirit. So they have their finger on the pulse in terms of the value of their watch, and they know what the watch is trading for. When it comes to me offering a direct buy price, there are two opposing forces at play, like two magnets repelling each other, and that is, I want to buy the watch as low as possible whilst being fair and understanding towards the seller, and the seller wants to sell the watch for the highest possible price for obvious reasons. I honestly don't enjoy managing these opposing forces, as sometimes it can create bad feeling. With many watches available on the market, pricing is quite alive, meaning watch pricing bobs up and down a bit like commodities and foreign exchange and even gold. Market pricing changes quite often. It ebbs and flows from low to high price points as supply and demand for watches fluctuates, watch trends and interests change, news hits and influencers give their opinions, and watches become more scarce and availability decreases. Perhaps a watch model becomes discontinued. I'll often need to explain that I'm a trade buyer and that you are asking for and hoping to get retail prices or end buyer pricing, and that they ideally would like to get that inflated price from the dealer. However, this is not the reality, and in this situation I'll suggest that they probably need to find an end buyer directly and sell directly to them. And this is where I'll politely decline the purchase offer and either wish them luck on their journey or offer to work with them in a slightly different way, where they can consign the watch to me to sell on their behalf. I'll do a separate video on this because it could be quite a long topic, but I'll also remind them of the role and the responsibilities of the watch professional, and also explain the internal business matters, explaining the reason for the price that I offered, and try to validate it by explaining that out of my profit margins come lots of business expenses, and the trade dealer margins get eroded really quickly. And I'll do a separate video on this also, as well as the pros and cons of working with bigger watch businesses and smaller ones. Often when advertising the watch for sale on the open market, there are lots of time wasters, and the person selling their watch will need to deal with the end buyer, and not knowing who that person is can sometimes open the door to a little risk. There are quite a few options for sellers wishing to sell directly to buyers, with some big watch marketplace websites like Chrono24 and eBay, who now have their watch authenticity service to help take much of the risk of the online buying process. There are pros and cons to dealing with a trade professional, and likewise to selling directly. My job is often to help sellers figure out what is best for them and then guide them down the right path. If the fit isn't good between me and the seller, then I'll happily recommend other options to them with no strings attached. I'll always try to find the best win-win outcome for everyone, and whether that is a direct purchase, fast and low hassle but a lower price, or a consignment service which will take a little longer but the seller will end up with more of the profits in their hands, and rightly so. Or we'll shake hands and part ways, and I'll share my knowledge and experience with them and help them on their way and find a solution that they're happy with, even if it doesn't mean me benefiting at all. Their safety and happiness is more important to me, and as Muhammad Ali once said, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. And my service to others and sharing my knowledge for the greater good is often more important to me than making money in business. So what do you think about this process of selling a watch? Have you ever sold a watch to a dealer and wondered what was the logic of their offer or their price and how they got to arriving at the price that they did? Do you prefer to sell your watches to an end buyer directly yourself, or do you like to have a middleman help facilitate the sale? If you have any experiences you can share, honestly, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you've got any value from this, please like the video by hitting that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more of this sort of watch related business stuff, please subscribe so you don't miss out on any weekly tips. And as always, if you have any comments or requests for me to cover any other topics, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Cheers, and see you on the next one.